And good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's Friday. Wow, October 1st. Who would have thought? It's been really weird out here in Colorado. It's been very hot, but finally fall is hitting. My aspen, or not my aspen, but my maple trees out front are starting to turn. They're gorgeous. Nice time of year. My favorite time of year. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Safety Foundation. Of course, this is the Food Safety Chat, and we are live every Friday at this time, 10 a.m. Eastern, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And we are here to discuss all things food safety. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Nathan Fryzek. Nathan, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Bryan. Thank you.
And let's see, where are you at in the world? You're in Lincoln, Nebraska, right?
Yep. Our business is located here in Lincoln, just on the eastern side of the state.
Nice. Now, are you in, I forget where the time zone line is. Yeah, you're in Central, aren't
Central
you?
time.
Yep. So
yep.
We grew up in Wyoming, my family, but all our relatives were in Iowa. And
okay.
So we always made that trek across the wastelands of Nebraska to go visit their relatives.
It's a nice way of putting it, Bryan.
Well, it was like a cartoon. I mean, it gets nicer when it gets over toward you. It gets a little greener and stuff like that. But for the western part of the state, it's like those cartoons where you see the scrolling background.
It's true. It's
like I saw that farmhouse before.
People tell me some of the desert, is it Los Angeles area or Las Vegas area? I'm sorry. Sort of the driving out in the middle of the deserts between cities out there is somewhat similar. There's few cities far between and just roadside stops, and that's about it. A lot of farms and fields and cows out here, Bryan.
Exactly. But yeah, no. So nice state. And of course, you guys have the Huskers there as well. So everybody, with this Food Safety Chat, one of the things, if you're new to this, one of the things I like to remind everybody is this is not what you normally see around food safety. This is not a PowerPoint presentation and Nate and I read slides and then at the end we take questions. This is interactive. And we're here to answer your questions and talk about different subjects and anything that comes to mind. My assistant Renee will be on here as well to help out as well. So one of the things that we always like to do here in the beginning, because I'm always amazed by this, is please, in the comment section, type in where in the world you're at. So I'm in Loveland, Colorado. So probably about 6 or 7 hours west of Nate. In Loveland, Colorado, about an hour north of Denver. And as I mentioned, the weather here is very gorgeous and it's a very nice place to live. Renee's on. Great to see Renee. Renee actually is in the Philippines. So that's great that he's able to do this with us. And we have people from all over the world, Nate, that join us. I'm always amazed by this. So let's kind of dive in. So you're with Presage Analytics, and you have a very long job title, which I had to write down.
That's okay.
So you're the QA director and customer development, sales, and marketing. You got a lot of hats on there, dude.
Yeah. So what does that mean, really? It means I do a number of things. We're a fairly small business, about 25 employees, but I've been in the food safety area for 6 or 7 years. Basically, solving problems is kind of, I know a lot of people use that as their job title, but we use digital platforms to be able to solve food safety quality assurance problems. So we talk to people that are not only our customers, but just food safety professionals in general. Mm-hmm. And we're looking for new and better ways of doing things within the industry and within whether it's the specific need and the function of the quality assurance manager, quality systems role, anything that's happening in food science, food safety, regulatory, quality assurance, all of those things are within our area of knowledge, and it's a place that we act to try to put digital solutions to make things easier for quality assurance managers.
Nice. And so, wow, we got some lovely people joining us here today. So Corey is here. Always great to see Corey here. She usually joins us every week, and so she's traveling back from Milwaukee from an audit. So fingers crossed. I hope your client did well. Good morning, Mitzi. Hector in New Jersey, and Catherine up in the Kansas City area. I always love going to New Jersey. It's a very interesting state, right? People think of the North, kind of around Princeton and things like this as New Jersey. But when you get to the southern side of New Jersey, right, it's a big state. You've got all kinds of farming down there, and tomatoes and strawberries and roadside stands and all these type of things. And of course, on the beach and, all the different capes and things down there. It's just a really cool state to visit. We had a plant when I was at White Wave there in Bridgeton, New Jersey, so I would spend a decent amount of time there. So you just did something that reminded me, Nate, of something that I'm always antsy to jump into the topic, and I always forget to do this, right, is having our beverage. So everybody, please join us in the morning ritual and have a sip with us. You got to make the noise, right? It's kind of like it's just one of those weird things in life, right? It's like when you kiss your significant other, your spouse, right, and you make that little mwah noise. Like, why? Right. But if you kiss them without making the noise, it's weird.
Just silently coming together.
Yeah. Just right. I don't know.
Bryan, it's a good thing we don't teach dating classes.
Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of amazing my wife tolerates me. That's for sure. But you said something, Nate, I think that was really important, and really this is going to be kind of an interesting session in that we're really talking about something that in my career, as you know, running quality assurance for different companies, it was something early on in my career that I looked at, and it didn't make any sense. And it was around how work instructions and how we have people respond to things in the plants doesn't really work. And we'll get more into that. But I think your points around how things are changing and stuff like that, we're seeing this all the time. And I think as we were, talking and chatting a little bit before we turned on the camera, is this whole thing around enhanced traceability and all of these type of systems. And with Frank Yanis down in the FDA, right, he's been on the retail side of things and understands that. And he went through some particularly painful issues when he was there that I think really influenced how he looks at things around traceability. And we're seeing this with the pillars under the enhanced traceability. And now we have the new, guidance around that of these higher risk foods. And I think the big lesson for people to pull out of that, Nate, is this frustration with FDA, right? So, for example, we were talking about this. There's been a lot of recalls around enoki mushrooms and listeria, and people get sick at retail. They go and they tell the retailer, "Hey, I ate these mushrooms and I got sick," right? And FDA gets notified, or maybe they contact FDA directly, right? And now FDA has to go back through that supply chain to figure out where in the heck this came from. And as we all know, in that supply chain, man, it's complicated, right? Super complicated. You have distributors and brokers, and you can buy stuff on Amazon now, and Fresh Express, and all these different services that are out there. And trying to figure this out and track all that back to the manufacturer and get to those records can be difficult. And that intermediate step where the process and the product isn't changed in any way, it's just sitting in a warehouse in refrigeration, doesn't impact that process. So FDA wants to get right directly back to that manufacturer and do it fast. And the way of doing things that we've done, shuffling paper and going through these records, FDA is not going to tolerate that anymore.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge thing. What is it, over the last, even 5-10 years, it's been discussion about how fast are you able to get to the records that you need to get to? Are you able to get the turnaround time to be able to find what was my responsibility in touching this product before it went to the next step? And as you mentioned, the FDA has discussed for a long time, how do we focus on the area that is likely to have the impact? So, is it the place where that intervention can be put into place, and did it happen, and did it happen in the correct way at the correct place? Did it and is it documented that it happened?
Exactly. And part of that too is confidence in your records, because there's nothing that makes you look like a bigger idiot than FDA says, okay, here's a problem. We're looking at this production. How much did you make and where did it go? And you go back to FDA and you say, well, according to our records, we made 10,000 cases and it went to these different places. And they're like, okay, fine. We need to, bring that back, destroy it, what have you. And the whole process begins. If you have to go back to FDA and say, hey, when I told you, 10,000 cases, well, actually I got some more documentation and it's looking more like 15,000, right? FDA's confidence in your ability to control and understand your processes just went down big time, right? So FDA is looking at the extra 5,000 cases and thinking to themselves, so what you're telling me is there's an extra 5,000 potential cases of this illness out there that you didn't even know about. Hard position to come back from.
Yeah, and just sort of bringing it down as well as when you're inside the plant and you're, a lot of discussion goes back and forth between what are we doing to make sure that it's safe, and what are the activities that we need to be performing and documenting that we're doing, So what are the important ones? What are the other ones that we're still doing that we need to say that we're doing? And what are the high value ones? And then which of those are preventative actions? So, a lot of the discussion, I see it go back, and I literally see this on LinkedIn, social media every single day, people discussing the difference between what they have to do and what they're required to do to prove to the community and everybody that they're doing a series of things to keep things safe, and then the really essential preventative actions and controls that go into applying controls correctly to the product based on whatever they're producing. So how there's always that tension, and again, it's discussed all the time between what we're doing, what we're saying we're doing, what we're documenting, and then also the things that we know are the really essential portions for keeping the control in place and operating correctly. Even though we're having issues with personnel, we're having issues with machinery, we're having issues, things are constantly changing every single day. And we're just trying to keep the process running smoothly and within control.
Exactly. And as FDA, right, they've been hitting the drumbeat on this. And we've heard this for years under like ISO 9001 is if you don't document it, it didn't happen. Right. Show me
Absolutely
the proof.
True.
Yep. So Kara, good morning. Always good to have Kara here. Of course, Kara was here as a guest recently, and she did an awesome job. Maggie, good morning. Usman, nice to see you as well. Kind of curious. Don't forget, guys, let us know in the world where you're at as well. So I always love to see that. I'm a traveler, and I like to see that. So definitely, I think really, and this session is kind of diving into some information in my book, and we're kind of given a teaser around that. So I wanted to kind of at least pop that up on screen. And so kind of bring it up like this, get in camera, right? There we go.
One?
Yep. Right. So I wrote this book a few years ago to kind of, pass along hard lessons that I learned, coming up through the ranks. And this book is really geared around those managers who are in that first role and setting up some systems and things that they may not know about. Because as you know, Nate, one of the hard things in your career is you go from a single contributor to a manager, right? So I started off as a microbiologist, and then all of a sudden you're a leader. And in a lot of cases, you're leading a team of people that you used to work with, and now they're looking at you like, oh, you think you're hot, and I'm not listening to you. I used to go to lunch with you, right? Type thing. And so you're getting that pressure from the bottom, but you're also getting it from the top because they throw you in an office and they say, okay, have fun, right? In most companies, there's no training around that, right? So it's sink or swim. And this book was written around some core things that I learned in different topics. And they're kind of things that are a little contrarian. So I actually talk about philosophy, believe it or not, in this book and why that's important. There's other topics as well. And so one of these that we're going to dig into is kind of what I call the core process. And let me kind of throw in here in the comments. So here's an actual link. Oops, I think I messed that up. Let me do it again. So here's an actual, oops, delete, paste. There we go. Error occurred. It didn't like that.
Just going to call out as you're doing that, just a few things that I noticed when I went through. Obviously, some references to Jack in the Box. So you can't really have a food safety discussion without talking about some of the biggest news that ever happened in food safety history. So definitely included in there. And then a couple points that we're going to, as you mentioned, that we're going to cover today, sort of almost like SIPOC, some of the ISO level sort of front to back discussion of what's happening inside the plant and how things are being handed off. And I won't cut you off too much on that, but then also sort of our key topic as well on work instructions.
Exactly. So that first diagram that you showed is one that I figured out that's super important. So really this is what we're talking about here in a production facility. And this really applies to anything, is what I call the core process. This is what makes us money, right? It's why we're in business. It's how we make the half and half that's in my coffee. It's how we make the coffee. It's everything. And every production facility, and this doesn't even necessarily just apply to food, has four main areas that you need to think about. And that's receiving, processing, packaging, and then shipping and warehouse, right? So half and half, right? You bring in raw milk and you receive it, then you put it in silos and then you process it, right? So you separate out the cream and you pasteurize it and all these type of fun things. Then you package it up on the half-gallon filler, and off it goes to the warehouse, and then specifications are tested and it goes to the customer. And one of the things that I learned, Nate, is that we tend to, in our field, think of things in terms of a process. And so this is the process for making half and half. But that's the wrong way to look at it. And you're like, what? The reason is because there's no one in the plant who makes half and half. It's a series of handoffs between different people who need to supply the person downstream. So if the receiving people don't check the specifications and they bring in cruddy raw milk, they're going to make cruddy half and half, right? And the farther you go down that process, the more costly it is to a company, right? The rule of thumb is for every step in a process you run through, you're increasing your costs of non-quality 10 times. And that's true, right? And now once you get to that recall piece that we're talking about, catastrophic, right? Millions of dollars are lost because of this. Bill Marler was on a couple of weeks ago. His law firm has recovered over $800 million in claims against food companies, right? For failures, right? So what does quality cost, right? A lot. And if you do it correctly, that's an investment in your company. So what I figured out with this process then is that for each of these different functions, there are certain things that they need to do to make sure it's okay. And then you hand it downstream. Now, here's the other key important thing, and write this down, is we're really, really good at documenting how to do things right, but we don't document what we do when things are wrong. Huge, right? Nobody does that. And so one of the things that I would do when I came across this process and I would create work instructions is I would sit down with the people performing a task, because people, as you know, Nate, automate things, right? It's kind of like watching somebody who's a really good golfer, right? You're like, and they step up and they whack the ball 500 yards or whatever. And that would be pretty amazing. We'll say 300. And you're just like, that guy would be Tiger Woods. And you're like, oh my God, how did you do that? Right. And they give you a few, it's like, all right, hold your hands like this. And it never works. Right. For them, it's automated, right? They've been doing it correctly for such a long period of time. Their body knows what to do, muscle memory, right? And they're really, really good at it.
How good are you with IKEA instructions, Bryan?
Oh, terrible. Yeah. It never ends up the way, right? You end up with extra parts.
How many little keys and screws do you end up with when you're done with your table, Bryan?
Exactly. And you're like, we'll see if this holds together or not. So one of the things I always do, good morning, Cheryl and Jennifer, good to see you, is I would sit down with these different groups. And in this core process, you start with receiving, and you sit down with the guys who receive, and you say, okay, guys, let's pretend that I'm working in your department. I'm the new guy. Teach me how to receive. And every time, Nate, the answer is always the same at the beginning. It's, well, what do you mean? Stuff shows up and we bring it in, right? They've automated that process just like the golfer. And I'm like, really? That's amazing. So trucks just poof, magically appear. How do you know that trucks are there? And they're like, oh, well, we get the schedule for receipts for incoming materials. Well, who do you get that from? Well, we get that from the purchasing clerk. She puts together the schedule every week and when the trucks come in. Oh, okay. So you need that first, right? Yes. Okay, great. So now you've got that and you know that a truck's coming on Monday. Yes. Great. Well, what do you do now? Do you just kind of hang around and wait for the truck to show up? Oh, no. Well, how do you know the truck's there? Right? Oh, well, there's a buzzer on the outside and they ring the buzzer. Oh, okay, great. Now what do you do? Well, we open up the truck. Well, hold on. What about, do you guys have a seal policy in place? Oh, yeah, we have seals. Oh, yeah, you're right. We got to check the seals. Okay, great. How do you do that? Well, we got to go outside. Well, why is that? Well, because the doors are locked and we can't open the doors until we check the seals. Okay. Well, what do you do if there's no seals? Oh, yeah, if there's no seals, I got to let my boss know. Well, what do they do? Right? So you see how this works.
Yeah, for sure.
And you flow chart all that out with these decision points. And what you're doing then is you're building in that process. And what I learned with this was that there's a decision-making hierarchy in the plant. And if it's set up properly, this is kind of how it works. And we'll stick with the milk example. Is let's say that the quality group sets up a parameter that says, okay, milk will be received at a temperature of 45 degrees or less. Okay, right? And they train everybody, and quality makes a big deal. It goes, rah, 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 right? We're quality and we control these things. And one day the milk comes in at 46 degrees. And it's like, right? And the receiver's like, crap.
It's pretty close to 45, Bryan.
Right. Well, darn it, we need this milk. Well, of course you need the milk. You need it to make the half and half. And if you don't get the milk, you're going to shut down the plant, right? So this causes all kinds of grief.
Sure.
So the receiver goes, hey, boss, I got a problem. And the supervisor comes over and says, what's going on? Says, well, the milk's 46. And the supervisor's like, ugh, right? Did you recheck the temperature? Yes, I checked it 3 times. It's 46. Are you using a calibrated thermometer? Yes. I mean, how about the other parameters, pH and the other stuff? Are those all good? Yeah, those are all good. It's just the temperature, right? So this goes up the chain of command in the plant, and the milk's sitting there in the bay, and the driver's impatient, and production's going, what's going on? And a conversation takes place, right? So the plant manager and the quality manager sit down, and the plant manager is going, all right, quality manager, come on. I mean, it's 1 degree warm. It's not going to hurt anything. I called the co-op. They said they had a little bit of mechanical problem with their cooling system. The milk is perfectly good. It's not going to cause any problems. Are you really going to shut down my plant for 1 degree? That's really stupid, right? So he's putting those screws to that quality manager, and the quality manager goes, guys, you're kind of right. Yeah, I think we're okay. Yeah, I'll let that come in, right? And so the word goes back down to the floor, and what's the receiver do? He brings it in and he goes, standards mean nothing, right? Quality said 45 or less. That doesn't mean anything. That only means something if it's in standard. If it's out of standard, we'll bring anything in, right? And the credibility of that quality manager has just gone down a big notch. The next time that quality manager tries to implement something, what's everybody do, right? Oh, yeah, whatever. We'll follow that until somebody tells us not to. Sure, whatever, blah, 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 right? And you end up with this completely undermining effect within the plant. And I looked at that and said, okay, that's not right. How do we actually do this in real life? And if you look at that process, there's something hidden there, what I call green, yellow, red zones. So in the same example, the green zone is the milk's 45 or less. Yep, everybody's happy. Okay, it's between 46 and something else, and we'll say 49. Can we have a problem? Oh yeah, we could have a problem. We could have, a temperature abuse issue. We could have a truck that wasn't cleaned properly, a million different things. Okay, well, management needs to get together, not just the quality manager, the entire operational team in the plant, right? So the QA guy and the ops guy and the plant manager and all these people say, okay, we've got some milk that's slightly out of spec. What do we want to do? This is a business decision, right? It's like, okay, well, we're taking a slight risk here. We may have complaints in the future because of this. It's not going to be catastrophic. Let's go ahead and bring in the 46 degree milk, and we'll make sure and track that. That team makes that decision. Now the red zone that's the line we're not going to cross. So in that example, let's say 50 degrees. So we all agree, right? This is all done in advance. We all agree that 50 degrees or warmer is a big problem. And everybody goes, oh yeah, right. If we have milk at 50 degrees, that's been abused. It's got bacteria growing like crazy. There's all kinds of enzymes in that milk. We're going to get complaints, right? Pasteurization, right, is not sterilization. You're going to get a 5 log reduction. And if you've got too much bacteria in there, you're going to have a lot getting through, right? It's going to cause an issue. So no, we're never, ever going to take in milk 50 degrees or warmer, right? Everybody signs off on it and off you go. Now, same scenario, Nate. Milk comes in at 51, right? The receiver goes, milk's at 51. Geez, we really need this milk, blah, 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 right? Goes to the plant manager, and let's say the plant manager is not thinking right, and he tries to do the same thing with the quality manager. Says, oh, come on, it's only 51 degrees. Totally different conversation now. It's like, whoa, right? Hold on. We already agreed that this is a serious problem, right? We cannot bring this milk in. Now, if you want to call Bryan at corporate QA and you can explain to him why this milk is now magically good, I'm sure he'd love to hear that. Well, I don't want to do that, right? Now that enforcement process on the floor is solid, right? And that yellow zone in the middle, right? That operator understands his responsibility, right? It's like, oh, I've got milk that's slightly out. I need to kick that up to management so they can make a decision. There's no conflict anymore, right? And the cool part is if things change on that work instruction, Nate, all you really have to do is change those parameters. All the reactions and all the different processes in that remain the same. So it's an easy document to maintain. So you build that out for each of those different steps in the core process. And it's amazing how well that works. And the weird thing is, obviously I've been in a lot of plants and dealt with a lot of different people. I've never seen that actually implemented outside of what I've done with it.
Interesting. Yeah, 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 it brings to mind a couple things for me, which is one of them in particular is just identifying. All right, we've got our in and we've got our out, right? And how can we
Yeah.
make that as simple as possible? And then what you're saying is within, it's got to be within our in, our marginal, right? Because if
Yeah.
it's out,
Yeah.
right? Anything above 50 in our example means we have to do something differently. Maybe even with our marginal, we have to do something differently. We have to do something differently when we're out, right? We need to dump the milk. Maybe that's our in our example, or repurpose or rework, or maybe we need to divert to a different place,
Mhm.
depending on what we're able to do with it if it's out. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, I refer to this as, so by making these decisions in advance, you prevent this hand wringing, right? So when a failure like this happens, on the spot decision making takes place, and there's a bias toward acceptance,
Interesting.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this eliminates all of that threat, right? And part of this too is you don't need to identify every potential problem, right? You just need to understand that if something is questionable in that yellow zone, it
Mm-hmm.
gets kicked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer, as the receiver, it's no longer your job to figure that out. It's management's job. And frankly, that's why managers are there, right? They're there to solve problems.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point too. Just thinking about from a systems perspective, how are we identifying who is responsible and what is the immediately so a lot of the behavior-based food safety that's been discussed recently, food safety culture is we're not talking about what happened at the time. We're talking about what happened immediately before the time when the issue
Right.
happened. So immediately before, that person down on the floor didn't know what to do, and that was for a specific reason. And that's maybe because it wasn't clear. Maybe the work instruction didn't tell them what to do.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe there wasn't a system in place to say, this is what we do in this instance versus that instance.
You've just said something, Nate, that's super, super important. So the false belief with thinking of like things like this as a process is that you have to have this gigantic document that documents everything in the process and everything that can happen. Well, good luck with that. That doesn't work. And even if you did it, nobody would read it. And once you write it, it's already obsolete. What people need to know is, what do I do if things don't go right? Because here's the problem is, if you don't train, and that's the other key element with this is training, is if you don't have a good training program in place, people will come up with their own answers, right? We see this all the time in life. So they will fill in the blanks themselves. And if you don't have a good training program in place to mentor and teach people on the floor the things that we're talking about, you're going to get what I call a hidden factory. What will happen is, and this is another huge problem with quality, is that we think falsely that if we write something, people will be forced to do it. Good luck, right? We think we're Moses, and we come down the mountain with the tablets of, here are the work instructions, you shall now do these things, right? And everybody kind of rolls their eyes and says whatever. And what happens on the floor then with that training is, okay, here's the work instruction that Bryan wrote. Now let me show you how we really do things. And if that happens, death, right? You're going to have failures all over the place, and you'll have no idea why. And quality's knee-jerk reaction in those situations is to write more documents, right? So this spiral just continues, right? So you need to understand that core process, and then realize that everything else supports the core process. So receiving, processing, packaging, and warehousing, right? That's how the bills get paid. Maintenance is there to support the process. Quality is there. Operations is there. Plant management is there. HR is there. Oh, you know, all of these functions support the core process, right? And you need to think of it in those terms.
A follow-up question for you on that.
Yeah.
When you think about, I have a problem in my facility and it's something that I'm getting more frequently. Well, I'm getting it at maybe an expected frequency, which is that it's not necessarily, it's maybe something that is known to affect quality more so than maybe safety. So it's maybe an issue that's a little bit more frequent, maybe an incoming something with our particular incoming ingredients. What are there any situations that you feel comfortable that the person at the time can be doing the troubleshooting on their own? Because what I'm hearing you say, and correct me and redirect me here, is if there's that issue, I do need to alert quality specifically, because they're going to help us make sure that what we're doing is food safe, and then also maintaining our brand and our food quality.
Right.
So we need to alert that person. We need to get them involved in the decision making and solving the problem. Are there specific issues that maybe they're not as impactful, or maybe they're so frequent that it's not maybe what you'd call a quality issue? Is it so? For instance, maybe I'm on the production line and I get a thing of labels, and maybe a couple of corners are ripped off or something like that. I'm trying to give you a specific example, but something maybe that's frequent.
Yeah.
Are there specific issues like that where it makes sense to have the judgment of the operator to make the decision, and it's not going to be a big impact? Maybe it does need to be documented so that we're tracking maybe waste or giveaway or something like that, but it's not something that we need to hit the four alarm stop and ring all the bells in the plant.
No, that's a really good observation, right? So data in a plant breaks down, from my perspective, into 3 buckets: operational data, quality data, and food safety data. Right. So the first one is interesting, and it helps run the plant, and the plant manager needs it, but it has no impact on quality. So let's say, for example, pounds per man hour, or energy consumption on a line, or employee vacation, whatever. Okay, fine. It's all just data the plant manager needs to do his very complex job. Quality data, then, to your point, Nate, are those parameters that we need and what the customer and the consumer expects from the product, right? So I've used this example before, right? We have expectations for this cup of coffee, right? It's got a flavor, it's got that aroma, right? That chocolatey smell when you grind it. The cream is nice and smooth. It's not clumpy, right? All quality parameters. It's what generates complaints. If it doesn't meet those expectations, people complain. Food safety is a yes or no thing, right? It's either it's safe food or it's not, right? And so when I would teach my quality managers, I'm like, okay, you're dealing in the quality and safety buckets. The quality data is there to help make decisions in the business. The food safety data is easy, right? If there's a failure, it's a yes or a no, right? And as the head of quality, if we have a food safety issue, it's your job as the quality manager to fight to the death to make sure that that product remains in our control and nothing happens to it, right? If there's a failure, it's a failure. There's no discussion. Quality, like this receiving example we were going over, Nate, is a business decision. And this is something that companies struggle with. And so I'm giving an example of this. Is I used to work for a company, and they did this amazing, and they still make it, a whipped cream cheese dip, right? And there's different flavors like salmon and mixed vegetable and things like this, stuff you serve at parties. And you got this ramekin, get my hands here, right? Get the ramekin, and you take your cracker, and you dip your cracker in there, right? And you get this nice scoop on your cracker. If you whip it too much, it gets like butter, right? And it's too hard, and your cracker breaks, and you're like, ugh, right? If it's too soupy, you dip in there and it's all gooey, and you're like, ew, right? What's that, right? You have an expectation for that product that when you go in there, it's, oh man, look at that, and it's sitting on that cracker, and beautiful, right? And the traditional approach to training on that on the floor is to have a gazillion different pictures and parameters and things that you think you can measure, but you really can't. And I started looking at that and saying, this isn't working because we're still getting complaints for this at both spectrums. So the operator and then the machine that did this votator and the filling machine, super complex. And the people that ran this machine had been doing this for 20 years. And they were constantly just knobs, all during the production run. I was like, okay, green, yellow, red. There's a target for that whip that we want on the product. And here's the challenging part with this, Nate, is you wouldn't see that until it's set up in the warehouse. It takes a little while. It's not obvious on the line because the cheese is still warm. It was around 75 degrees when you were filling. And what we did is I had a fantastic sensory manager at this facility. And she would work with the operators, and she would teach them exactly what that product should look like coming off the line. So that we would have sessions in the lab, and her name was Zina. And Zina would pull everything together and do exactly what I was just showing you and say, okay, guys, watch this, watch this. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect for this product. And she would do this. And it would do like a little pigtail ice cream cone thing. And she's like, see that? Perfect, perfect. Now let me show you an example of overwhip. Now let me show you an example of underwhip, right? If it trends in those directions, you need to correct it, right? And here's what you do, blah, blah, blah. So back to the line, right? So you have the operator on the line who is checking that. Green now reads proper whip. That's all it says. Proper whip. Yellow is slightly hard, slightly soupy. Okay, what do I do? Right, I adjust my machine, but they don't need to. I don't need to teach them how to adjust the machine. They already know that, right? They have been trained and they've been doing it for 20 years. They don't need me, right? Plus, if I see them reading the work instruction on the line, we're kind of hosed, right? Because they don't know what they're doing. So the instruction process was this for the yellow zone on that. And sorry about the long setup, but I think it's important. Is you have the operator on the line now, right? And they do this test. And let's say it's a little soupy and they're like, right? So they pull another one, they do it, right? So now what they do is they go to the lab and they say, hey, Zaina, take a look at this. What do you think, right? They've elevated the decision. Zaina then would look at this and go, yeah, you're right. Slightly soupy. It's not too bad though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on hold in the warehouse and I'm going to do extra sampling tomorrow when it gets down to temperature. In the meantime, I want you on the line to double your sampling and keep a really, really close eye on this. And if it gets worse, let me know. And here's the thing that's absolute anathema in a plant. Shut down. What? Yeah. If it keeps getting worse, stop. Don't make bad product, right? Now, granted, some things you can't stop, right? But the whole goal is to keep that stuff from going out the door, right? And now the operators, even with a parameter which appears to be non-measurable, is completely controllable, right? Because now the operator understands through training how they need to react. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. And it reminds me of a couple things. One is people communicating in different areas as near it possible to instantaneously as you can to make adjustments as quickly as you can. So sometimes if you're having a serious enough issue, maybe you need to make a phone call, right? Maybe you need to send a text message. Maybe you need to go there in person. If it's maybe sort of one other thing I can think of directly related to that is, as we're measuring or looking at things that are coming out and finished, and we still need to be making in-process adjustments.
Right.
So sometimes for some things that are measurable versus not measurable, maybe you're as you're saying, someone's making a judgment and then they're giving you the green or the red or the yellow. But what's the best way, or what's the quickest, in certain cases, what's the quickest way of communicating the information? Technology perspective, it's always as digital as possible. So I can tell you if something's going wrong here, back there, you need to go do something about this. And the second thing you said that's really interesting is you're saying it looks like it's getting soupy, right? Or whatever. So, and again, with this example, there's a lot of human element. So it's taste, touch, and feel, perhaps, maybe sensory. And a lot, it's like a brewing or a lot of industries, maybe a lot heavy sensory panels and things like that. But in other instances, there may be examples where I'm getting, a result that's a 5. The next result I get is a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All my green and yellow areas may be up to 20, but I got a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I don't see that data in front of me. I'm going somewhere. I may not be noticing it if I'm doing record keeping, but I am going in a direction, and I need to be catching that before I do hit 20, 25, 30, because then we're in a problem area. So
that's a great point, because I think this is why we kind of chose this topic to talk about today, because I think it meshes really nicely with what you guys are doing. It's if then, right? If then decision making. If the product gets soupy, then do this, right? And building that type of parameters into the process and automating that and getting that out of the paper realm.
And some of those things that we're discussing are pretty straightforward, right? There's a couple things that. So let's just take the very basic example. You do paperwork. This number's, you got a little written thing there on your paper, and it says do it less than 10 or whatever for this column that we're recording. You record a 15, all right? So then maybe you continue throughout your paperwork. Now you hand that off to your boss, and your boss sees that it's a 15, and they're like, wait, why didn't you tell me about this, right? Yeah. Where one of the benefits with digital solutions, you say the 15 flags the boss, right? It texts the boss, that it sends an alert, an email to the boss, and it sends it then. It doesn't send it when you put the paper on the desk, and then the paper's picked up off the desk at the end of the day after the other 25 papers are gone through, and then we find the 15. And we realized 3 hours ago, we probably should have done something about the 15, right?
Yeah.
So how are we making better decisions based on prioritizing things that are important that are outside our green, yellow, and red zones by making them more important as they trigger or even trend, right? As we start to step out of the zone, how are we taking action then instead of 3 hours later when it's sitting on the manager's desk?
Yeah. I mean, that's a hot button for me, big time. Nothing frustrated me more, and I'm sure other quality managers on the call here can chime in with this too. Of coming into work, and then the plant manager comes to me and says, "Oh, hey, Brian, we got a bunch of product on hold from yesterday." Okay, why? Well, there's some stuff going on, and we need you to check it and let us know what to do. Oh, by the way, we're going to short a bunch of customers, so tell us what you want to do. We have a quality problem. And I'm like, ugh, right? And now they've just handed you this hot potato, right? And the correct answer is, I didn't make the bad product. Why are you calling this a quality problem? It sounds like an operational manufacturing problem to me. And let's figure out what you did wrong and then get to the action on that, right? And this is not right. They're trying to give you their problem, right? This is something that should have been solved right when it happened. Instead, they let it keep going. It ended up in the warehouse, and now they want to dump it on you. And if you give the okay to ship the product, it's forgotten. And when the complaints roll in a month later, it's your fault.
Who gets the customer complaint?
Yeah, it's
you
your
do.
fault. Right? So yeah, these things have to be fixed at the time. Yeah, a good example of this, right, with I think that kind of meshes with what you're talking about is weight control, right? A quality parameter for the product. And you have check weighers and things on the line and stuff like this that record that information, but operators aren't checking that real time. What they'll do a lot of times, old school, is they'll pull product off the line and throw it on a scale and check the weight. And to your point, Nate, they'll graph it out. And you got your upper and lower control limits, and you got your target weight, right? And you've got your little dots going there for your samples. And to your point, if you're seeing a trend where you've got, statistics, right? You've got 5 in a row that are going up. Oh, even though it's in range, you need to make an adjustment, right? And these type of things. That needs to happen real time, right? And the operator needs to control that right away.
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple questions in chat too, Brian. I want to direct to your attention
Yeah,
there.
let's get to please.
And I don't know, maybe you want to.
Yeah, let me read through these. So yes, we had a user who made a comment, and then we'll get to Wallison's question. Thank you, Wallison, for putting that in. We appreciate it. So unfortunately, sometimes upper management, in attempting to create higher quality through interdepartmental competition, causes problem at the point where the product's ownership changes departments from production to processing, and conflicts arise in who actually has ownership at the point of the problem. Counterproductive to food safety culture because it's been to determine the minutia of whose product it is instead of concentrating on food safety. Absolutely. Here's an example of that. So back to this same plant that was making this dip, right? This cream cheese dip. There was a big production room where this took place. And so you bring in receiving, right? You bring in the ingredients, you would make the cream cheese, and then that cream cheese would get pumped over to this room. And you had these big kettles. And so at the beginning of the room, you had these kettles, and they would add in the cream cheese. The mixers would do this, and then they would add in the flavors, right? So like we were talking about, vegetables or salmon or things like this. And then they would mix that up and then send it to this filling line where they're doing this test, right? If that temperature wasn't just right, the operator couldn't control it because they didn't have enough thermal capacity in the rotators for big temperature swings. So that temperature range of that product, Nate, coming over from the mixers was like about plus or minus 2 degrees, very tight. Mm-hmm. And those two groups, when I started putting this process in place, fought like cats and dogs all day long. I would be out on the floor watching. And so the operator for the mixing machine, the rotators and things like this, would have soupy product, and they would yell over to the mixers and say, "Hey, the mix is too warm." And then they would yell back and say, "Well, if you ran your machine better, you'd know how to do it." Right? And I'm just like, oh, right. And what I figured out with this core process, right? Receiving, processing, packaging, warehouse. The mixing was processing, right? And then it would go to packaging. Processing has a customer. That customer is packaging. Just like receiving, their customer is processing, right? And so I'm like, okay, there's absolutely nothing the person running that mixing, the rotating machine and all these type of things can do to impact that temperature of the product coming over. That's the mixers. It's their job. So I put the work instructions in place and we said green, yellow, red. Okay, for temperature going to the rotator, it needs to be 75 plus or minus 1 degree. If it's too hot or too warm, that's your fault. It's not their fault. It's your fault. You need to control it. And if you don't, I'm going to come ask you questions, not them, you. And guess what? Problem went away, right? Because now they understood who was responsible for what. Golden rule in a plant. If 2 people are responsible for something, nobody is, right?
That makes
I
perfect
think
sense.
that's the point that they're trying to make here, right? Is that you have to understand where that responsibility gets at. So I hope that that addresses the comment that was being made there.
I think that's a pretty spot on point for anybody in any role. If you're listening, you have a customer in your business somewhere. Even if I work in sales, I'm sending something to our product team. We need a new feature. I need to hand off the important parts of that to them. And if I don't do a good job with the handoff, then their part gets 10 times harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just part of doing your job, right? And that's just an important lesson, I think, for everybody.
Right. You have to understand what they need to deliver. So if you think that they can turn around a software enhancement in 4 weeks when it takes a year and you promise 4 weeks, right?
We don't promise 4 weeks. That's why we don't promise 4 weeks, right?
Right. And you need to understand that. You need to understand those parameters. And sometimes in organizations, those channels get mixed up. Let's see. So Wallison had a comment here. Good morning. From your example, it seems like troubleshooting is a big part of a quality professional routine to achieve the desired quality specs. Yep. From your perspective, what could get in the way of that, of the QA manager, QA team is not, from your perspective, what could get in the way of that? The QA manager or QA team is not troubleshooting. I'm not quite sure I understand this question. What do you think, Nate?
From your perspective, what would get in the way of that?
So what could prevent good troubleshooting? Well, and so Wallace, and if you can provide some additional clarity, if we don't get this right, you just type some more. Part of this, right, is kind of the example of what I talked about, right? With receiving, you have to put the time in, right? If you're developing this process, you have to pull that information out of these groups because they've automated it, right? They do this day in and day out, and they know how to do it. It's your job as quality when you're creating the processes to pull that out of them, to understand it, and to get all those details. And you're probably not going to get it right the first time, right? You're going to go back and miss things. So let's say, for example, in that receiving, you forgot the truck inspection, right? And a big chunk of that is when you open the doors after you check the seals and the paperwork and all those type of things, is checking for damage and make sure a skunk doesn't jump out the back and all these type of things, right? And let's say you forgot that, right? Now you can go back and add that in, right? This is a continuous process. And again, simple as hard, right? Of putting those things in place that those guys need to know just to do their job, and that's it, right? And the directions associated with that. So I don't really think there's anything in there that could get in the way, right? Because everybody in the plant wants to do a good job, right? Everybody. And as the quality group, what we're doing is we are kind of like the soul of the organization. We're the conscience. We're the little angel or the devil sitting on the shoulder of the management team saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is what we need to do, right? You're guiding them in the right direction and helping them. And quality is unique in that aspect because we have oversight over everything going on in that plant, right? We're poking our nose into all kinds of stuff and helping people get those things done. And again, I think, Wallace, and maybe a good point, a little comment here as well, is we don't dictate. Right. If you're the Moses example, right? If you think you can tell people how to do their jobs, you're wrong, right? They have to teach you. What could prevent troubleshooting as a follow-up? Data, right? If you don't have good data, it's going to be really, really hard. Or if you have an unclear investigation methodology, or you have bad data. Let's say, for example, you get a customer complaint back that says product's bad. Right? It's like that guy you see on TikTok that makes fun of the memes where people do stupid things and he just does it simply and he goes like this.
Cobby Lane. Yeah, that's his name.
Right? If it says product bad, forget it. There's nothing you can do with that, right? You can't investigate that. part of this too, and this is a good point too, Wallace, and I'm glad you brought this up, is with that core process, if you set it up correctly, you go backwards through the process to figure out where the problem happened. So let's say you had a quality defect in the product and now you're doing an investigation. You start at receiving. I'm sorry, not receiving. You start at shipping, not receiving. And you work your way backwards and you say, okay, did everything in shipping happen the way it should have happened? What about packaging? What about processing, right? And you're going to find through those parameters where the failure was. And if you set it up correctly, you know where it happened in the process. Hopefully that answers your question.
Just chip in a couple things, Brian. A couple quick thoughts on this, maybe like 2 or 3 here. One quick one is my friend Stacy. She has this methodology called How to Make a Peanut Butter Sandwich, talking about work instructions. So she tells you write down how to make a peanut butter sandwich, and then people try to follow it, and then they follow it exactly, and then it never turns out the way that you described it in your notes. So that's one thing that is important for people to understand, is the way you write it doesn't mean that's the way it's going to be interpreted. It's what's going to be taken out into the wild. Whatever people are going to do with it, they're going to do with it. The second thing, another quick point on that, there's a professional, Michelle Fanistel, and I'm sorry if I butchered your name. She just in the last couple of weeks reminded me of this concept called painting done, and it's this idea that you want to show the person the way, like what done looks like, right? You need to have a representation of what done looks like in every job, right? So whether that's a picture, whether that's a video, whether that's text, whether that's a finished good, and it looks a specific way, you need to show the person not only the process, or the person needs to show you the process too, as you're describing. But then we need to understand what's done, and we need to understand what's done correctly and what's done incorrectly. And that's for your earlier point between correct and incorrect. So this thought about painting done is really important. I'll just try to throw in a quick story. I used to work at Hy-Vee overnight, stocking shelves at a grocery store. And I used to stock things very, very specifically, all of the labels pointing to the front, neatly arranged in a row, and all sort of like this. And there was 2 or 3 other ways that people were doing this more quickly. So some people wouldn't align all the labels. It's called facing if you work in a grocery store. So facing all the labels. And sometimes, is it really necessary at the very back of the row to have all the labels facing? Some people say yes, some people say no, but that's going to cost you a lot of time, right? So that's a quality aspect. So it's one of those things that is going to affect the perception of the customer, but your team may be doing too much and wasting too much time doing specific tasks that aren't delivering anything that's affecting the customer perception. If they're saying that to you through their complaints, through the number of complaints you're getting. So sometimes you might be doing too much, and you need to understand when you're wasting time and doing too much in specific areas. So are you painting done an accurate picture of what's the right amount, and not too little and not too much? I think that's a really interesting concept that I recently heard. And then just a final one, this concept of VARK, excuse me. So we were talking a little bit, how do people learn when they look at work instructions? So they look at them, and they may read the text. And if I read text sometimes, I'll pass it through me, and then I'll ask the person. I'll say, what did you mean to say when you wrote this? The text itself will just flow past me sometimes, and I'll have 10 more questions. It's my learning style. But if someone draws me a picture or shows me a video and shows me what done looks like, or if they demonstrate it to me, or they let me do it with my own hands, then I'm much more engaged. I'm the kind of person that's more than just a non-visual learner. I'm definitely a visual learner. And then VARK stands for visual, auditory, read, write, kinesthetic. So working with things, listening to them, seeing them, and using reading and writing. So one of the benefits of technology that you can now use videos and pictures and things like that, integrate them directly with the work instructions that you have to appeal to a broader set of learners. And a lot of the conversation we discussed before as well, a lot of the things around culture are understanding what the group of people that you're working with are, what are their behaviors, and how can you best serve them with the information that you're trying to get across. And so if you're serving them in a way that they understand, it's going to make their lives easier, it's going to make their job easier, and they're going to be able to get things done to your specification and to their customer specification more easily, because you're serving them in a way that meets what their needs are. So a couple quick thoughts on blending in work instructions, culture, and all that stuff.
Yep. No, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, we'll kind of bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level. So part of this, right. And training, we do a whole nother show on training, that's for sure. And maybe I will, But everything that we've been talking about is predicated on having a person who is trained and knows how to do that role. And super important for training on these type of things. And I think, a lot of the work at Presage Analytical and automating these type of things, definitely everybody here, we've got Nate's email on here. If you'd like to know more about what he's doing in the company, they're doing some really cool stuff, check it out and see what they're doing there. Nate, as you can tell, super easy guy to talk with. So definitely take a look at this. And one of the things, Nate, that's always amazing with these chats is how fast they go, right? We're at the end already. Let's see here. So the comment here, FDA determined that people respond better to visual learning. Yeah, definitely. And the video piece of it now is huge, right? In my work instructions that we were talking about, I talked about flowcharts, right? I always flowchart out the process, and then I write the process to the flowchart, right? So that covers those elements there from that side. And shift to pictographs, right? Sky's the limit, guys. There's amazing things out there to do these type of activities and to collaborate around these activities as well. One of the things, and I'll throw this in here at the end to close out as well, is I've created a group on locals, right? So this is a community, and I've created this group, and it's free. And I share food safety information there, recalls, and these type of things that we all need to keep track of. And all you got to do is sign up for that, and you're in. And I think I got here. Yep. So here is the link to that. So foodsafetyfoundation.locals.com. Go there and sign up, and bam, you're in. So we're all in this together, right? And there's all kinds of different ways to approach things. And the whole thing is diving in and doing it. So hopefully this was helpful today and provided a new perspective on how to look at work instructions, right? Don't focus on documenting how to do things right. Focus on documenting what to do if things go wrong. Right? That's critical. If this didn't work, what do I do now? Right? And how can you automate those processes to make everybody's life easier? So that's closing on my side. Anything from your perspective, Nate? Anything else?
Just a final word on one call to action I would have for people would be, if you haven't used anything around video or pictures in your process before, go shoot a 2-minute video in your process, show it to somebody. That way other people are engaged with it. And then you'll sort of start to bring other people on board, and people will want more of it. If you get some success with it, maybe get it rolling together and start to use more assets, more tools, more technology in your process.
Absolutely. So welcome everybody. We're to October, right? So we're here every Friday. So next Friday on the 8th, we'll be here again for the next food safety chat. We start at 10 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Mountain, my time. And we will do the same format. So we hope to see you here again, and we'll see you next Friday. And Nate, enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a beautiful one.
Bryan, I'm actually hiking in Colorado this weekend.
Nice. That's right. Yeah, you're going down in the Garden of the Gods, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, you're going to have a great time. Couldn't have picked a better weekend. Thank you, everybody, for joining. You are what make this show enjoyable and interesting, and we appreciate all your comments and the feedback. So enjoy your weekends, and we will see you back here next Friday. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Bryan.